So we're starting this deep dive today, not with a prediction, but with a confirmed financial disaster. $240 million.
And that's the known loss, right? So far.
So far, from just a single program, the Federal Child Nutrition Program in Minnesota.
Yeah, and federal prosecutors are using language that you almost never hear in white-collar crime.
What do they say?
They're calling it industrial-scale fraud.
Industrial scale. Wow.
It's the sheer audacity of it all, and, the numbers just keep growing. We have over 75 defendants charged, and 56 of them already convicted.
But it goes beyond that one program.
Way beyond. The U.S. Attorney's Office is warning that the total financial hemorrhaging across all 14 of Minnesota's state-run safety net programs could climb into the billions.
Billions. So here's the question that really defines our investigation today. How did a government program, one designed to feed hungry children, become so completely dismantled that it turned into a massive systematic theft operation?
And we have a stack of sources that don't just detail the crime. They allege a deliberate political choice that allowed it to happen.
Exactly. The House Oversight Committee is now actively investigating this.
And what they're alleging is that the state's administration, which is Democrat-controlled, had clear, specific warning signs. I mean, red flags. But, and this is a quote, chose not to act for fear of political retaliation.
And that right there, that's the core of the issue we're digging into. The alleged choice to prioritize, political avoidance over protecting taxpayer money.
So our mission for this deep dive is clear.
We're going to trace the legislative changes that, in effect, remove the safety locks on the bank vault.
Yep, and we're going to show you the trail of money from these fraudulent claims straight to luxury cars.
And then we'll connect those findings to the sudden and massive financial windfalls for some figures who are very closely tied to this whole collapse of regulatory guardrails.
It's a deep dive into accountability, or maybe the total lack of it. Let's start at the beginning, the moment the opportunity opened up.
Right, the pandemic.
Exactly. The legislative environment changed completely.
Okay, so that moment really centers around what critics are calling the key enabling factor, the Meals Act.
This was legislation introduced by Representative Ilhan Omar back in 2020.
And on the surface, the goal was benevolent, right? Relax government oversight of kids' meal programs to get food out faster during a crisis. It even passed with bipartisan support.
The intent might have been good, but the consequences, well, according to our sources, they were just disastrous. This regulatory relaxation meant that essential verification barriers, they were just gone.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, normally a nonprofit has to prove they're serving real meals to eligible kids at approved sites.
Okay.
The Meals Act, combined with federal guidance to just move the money quickly, as Governor Walz himself described it, it effectively took the guardrails off the entire system.
So if you think of government oversight as a bank vault, this legislation basically disabled the locks.
And criminals who realized the vault was suddenly wide open, they acted immedately and very, very aggressively.
Which takes us right to the scale of the Feeding Our Future scandal.
And this is where the numbers stop being abstract and start feeling like a punch to the gut.
They were claiming reimbursement for millions of meals that were never served.
Millions. They were phantom meals. This wasn't someone skimming a little off the top. This was large-scale, enterprise-level theft.
Let's put a face on it. One convicted operator, Salim Ahmed, said.
Right.
He was found guilty of stealing more than $12 million.
$12 million. And he did that by falsely claiming to have served 3.9 million non-existent meals.
The scheme wasn't even that complex. It was just filling out forms for services that were never, ever rendered.
And the money wasn't just sitting in savings accounts. Sources detail this almost instantaneous conversion of taxpayer funds into luxury assets.
We're talking rapid acquisitions of high-end real estate luxury cars.
And that one anecdote that just sticks with you. One of these individuals had a documented $9,000 per month shopping habit at Nordstrom.
Paid for with money that was meant for hungry children.
Entirely. The speed and just the brazenness with which they flaunted this new wealth, it tells you everything about their confidence. They thought they'd never get caught.
Which brings us to the most critical question of all. Why weren't they stopped?
And that's our next segment. The bureaucratic paralysis. How a few red flags were allowed to metastasize into a $250 million systemic failure.
Because the sources are clear, the state was warned.
Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Yep. The Minnesota Department of Education, the MDE, they actually saw red flags with feeding our future even before the pandemic.
So this wasn't a blind spot. The warning lights were flashing years ago.
And then later, the Office of the Legislative Auditor, the OLA, their conclusion was that MDE's oversight was explicitly inadequate.
They called them ill-prepared.
Right. Ill-prepared to handle the issues they saw. They essentially failed to act on clear warning signs.
And the sources suggest this failure wasn't just incompetence. It was a political choice.
That's the allegation, that state officials were reportedly paralyzed by a deep fear of negative press, of litigation.
And specifically,
they feared being accused of racial discrimination if they scrutinized the Somali-American operators of these nonprofits too closely.
so the fear of being labeled racially discriminatory became a kind of impenetrable shield for fraud.
It created a perfect storm. The legislative guardrails were gone, and the bureaucratic security guards were too afraid of political friction to even sound the alarm.
And taxpayer funds were just completely vulnerable.
And crucially, this systemic weakness wasn't isolated. It wasn't just the child nutrition program. Our sources detail the same lax controls across multiple social services.
Take Minnesota's Housing Stabilization Program. It's meant to help seniors and the disabled.
And it was defined by low barriers to entry and, critically, light record-keeping rules.
That combination, low barriers and light rules, it turned Minnesota into a magnet for what sources are calling fraud tourism.
Yeah, I mean, you had individuals from as far away as Pennsylvania reportedly traveling to Minnesota specifically to exploit the state's notoriously lax controls.
That's how vulnerable these programs became. And it extended to health programs, too.
Oh, yeah. The EIDBI autism program fraud.
EIDBI, for anyone unfamiliar, stands for Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention.
And the scheme there was a provider allegedly recruiting parents, falsely certifying their children for treatment, and then using unqualified teenagers to conduct those services.
All while paying the parents kickbacks.
And that provider is charged with stealing $14 million from that program alone. It just shows a systemic pattern of exploitation across Minnesota's entire human services architecture.
But I think the most severe allegation linked to these funds. It takes us far beyond state lines. It raises real national security questions.
It really does. The sources point to serious reports alleging that funds fraudulently obtained from the Department of Human Services, or DHS, were sent overseas.
Through hawalas.
Right, through hawalas, to fund terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab and ISIS.
And for listeners who might not know, hawalas are these informal, trust-based money transfer systems. They let you move money across borders fast without using formal banks.
Which makes the funds extremely difficult to trace.
And sources confirm the U.S. Treasury Department actually launched an investigation into whether these tax dollars were diverted to Al-Shabaab.
And the oversight of these remittance payments has been under state purview since 2014. If this is proven, it would mean Minnesota's failure in oversight potentially allowed taxpayer money to fuel terror.
That just underscores the true gravity of ignoring basic financial accountability.
And the accountability concerns just get deeper. Whistleblowers have alleged that DHS employees are actively deleting data.
To cover up this fraud.
To cover it up. If that's accurate, we're not just looking at a breakdown in governance, but a potential effort to obstruct justice.
Which brings us directly to this tangled web of political connections and the financial irregularities surrounding the figures involved here.
Let's start with the central political figure, Representative Omar.
Right. She introduced the Meals Act, the enabling legislation for this whole nutrition fraud. And our sources detail some pretty significant ties between individuals charged or convicted and her campaign.
She got donations from at least 3 individuals who have now been convicted of fraud in these schemes. It's a tight web.
And the connections go deeper than that. One convicted fraudster, Guhad Hashi, said he pleaded guilty to running a fake food site, pocketing $3.2 million.
And he was.
A former campaign worker for Omar. She also held her 2018 victory party at Safari Restaurant, which was co-owned by Salim Ahmed Said.
The same man convicted of stealing $12 million through the phantom meal fraud.
These facts, drawn directly from our source material, they paint a picture of key legislative action benefiting individuals who are directly connected to the politician responsible for it.
And a financial scrutiny, it doesn't stop at the campaign. It leads directly to her immediate family.
Okay, here's where the facts about personal wealth just become stunning. Her husband, Tim Walz, his venture capital firm, Rose Lake Capital, reportedly saw its assets increase from under $1,000 to somewhere between $5 million and $25 million.
In a single year. according to Representative Omar's own financial disclosures from 2023-2024.
I mean, let's just state that again. A surge of potentially several thousand% in 12 months.
And at the same time, Representative Omar's disclosed net worth jumped from negative $25,000 to between $6 million and $30 million.
This staggering and incredibly rapid accumulation of wealth happened precisely during the period when federal investigations into these massive fraud schemes in her state and in her district were intensifying.
And Minette's firm made some quick moves once the heat was on.
What did they do?
After the federal indictments dropped in the Minnesota fraud case, his firm quietly removed the names of its high-profile advisors, including former Obama administration officials, right off its website.
It looks like an effort to eliminate any visible connections when public scrutiny became unavoidable.
And this quick accumulation of massive capital is set against a background of what sources describe as highly irregular financial behavior.
Like his consulting firm, E Street Group, it received more than $600,000 in coronavirus relief money in 2020.
Yeah, about $135,000 through the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and another $500,000 through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL.
And if we look at his other ventures, we see a pattern of really high-risk dealings.
Right. There was the failed winery venture, EST Crew.
It promised one investor a guaranteed 200% return on a $300,000 investment in 18 months.
Industry observers were quick to call that out, saying a guaranteed 200% return is just not sustainable for a legitimate winery, especially when his own prospectus was only listing a return of 20%.
That kind of promised return, plus a severe 10% monthly interest penalty if the payment was missed. It points to what seems like a desperate or at least reckless approach to finance.
And we should also note, Minette and his partners still owe $1.2 million to 3 South Dakota companies from a separate failed cannabis venture.
So the overall picture is stark. You have a politically connected individual with a history of highly irregular financial behavior who suddenly sees a massive, largely unexplained explosion in wealth during a period of industrial-scale government fraud in his spouse's district.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? This deep dive has exposed a clear and, frankly, alarming pattern of systemic failure. You had legislative action that relaxed controls.
Then you had bureaucrats who allegedly ignored glaring warning signs and audit conclusions because they feared political retaliation, specifically being accused of discrimination.
And that fear, it led to a catastrophic collapse of accountability across multiple programs.
A vacuum, which was then immediately exploited for hundreds of millions in fraud, diverted funds that paid for luxury shopping, real estate, and, most troubling of all, these unconfirmed but very serious allegations of funds being funneled to foreign terror groups.
Meanwhile, political insiders connected to the very programs that facilitated this financial chaos saw massive increases in their personal and business wealth.
With very little public transparency about where that capital came from, it raises critical questions about potential illicit enrichment. The analogy of the open bank vault is just. It's inescapable. In Minnesota, the state not only removed the locks, the regulatory guardrails,
but then they allegedly ignored the piercing alarms, all to avoid political friction. And this allowed fraudsters, as our sources state, to just walk out with millions of taxpayer dollars intended for the most vulnerable people.
So the central provocative thought we're left with is this. If systemic fraud, allegedly totaling hundreds of millions and potentially linking back to terror financing, can thrive in one state because of the fear of bad press and the deliberate removal of basic oversight,
then what other government programs all across the country lack the necessary accountability to protect public funds? The price that is ultimately paid for political conveniences right now tallied at $240 million and climbing. That is a truly deep dive into the cost of fear.